Dear students, today we will discuss second lecture of second module, individual behavior dynamics, that is psychological contract. Students, in any organization, it is very important to align the expectation of employer and employee. If it is properly aligned, then organizations will have great output, efficiency and effectiveness. Now questions arise, what way we can align expectation of employees and expectation of employer? That defines the psychological contract. Psychological contract is the construct very useful in organizational behavior, defined by Sechin in the year 1965. Now you will see what way psychological contract will benefit the organization as well as individual. This particular lecture we will be knowing which are the factors which create or shape the psychological contract, and what are the consequences of breach of psychological contract. So many things we will discuss under this particular groups. See definition, types of psychological contract, characteristics of psychological contract, formation of psychological contract, antecedents of psychological contract, impact of psychological contract, breach of psychological contract, managing a psychological contract effectively. That means several issues, several content you will be studying under this particular segment. See the first part, what exactly psychological contract is. It is defined by different authors in different way. One of the authors defined it is the unwritten contract between the employee and the organization, that is an unspoken relation between an employee's cohort and their chief. An unwritten contract between the employee and the organization, that is an understood relation which is being fulfilled both by the employees and the employer. Sechin, 1965. Portwood and Miller, 1976, define psychological contract a pattern of interaction in an organization among supervisor and the subordinate, which influence the work behavior and attitude of the respective parties. Psychological contract is a sense-making progression that occur in an organization within employer and employee at the time socialization. That is Bose et al. 2003. Ultimately, it's a unwritten mutual consent between supervisor and subordinates, between employer and employee, between manager and employee. Unspoken, unwritten, what is the great bond which tie up the relationship between employer and employee. Now see division of psychological contract. What are the two different classification of psychological contract? Transactional contract and the relational contract. Transactional contract is a short-term economic based and which is extrinsic exchange between employer and employee. It is primarily centered around tangible rewards such as salary, benefits and other compensation in return for specific tasks or work performance. Rousseau, 1995. That means that is the extrinsic exchange, some kind of tangible benefits which is called as the transactional contract. and it is given to the employees. Now, relational contract is something like that implicit long-term agreement where employees and employers where mutual expectation which are often unclear, unwritten, based on trust, respect and commitment, Rosso 1995. So, one is the short-term contract, one is the long-term contract, which is unwritten, unspoken, which is based on mutual cooperation, trust and commitment. Now see, what is the exact difference? Because so many research has been done by different institutions, academic field, management, commerce, economics, psychology, everywhere. Some of specific clarification, demarcation is there. Like as transactional contract focus on short-term specific tasks and outcomes, and relational contract focus on long-term ongoing relationship. Nature of exchange. I think relationship is not possible without any kind of exchange. Either it is tangible or intangible. What kind of tangible economic benefits we are offering? We are exchanging salary, benefits, bonus like that. But in the case of relational, we are exchanging emotional, psychological, trust, loyalty, career development. And it's very important to know that relational contract is the long-term contract. It is the duty of the organization to think about the career growth, progression of employees. Reward, extensive reward is there in the case of transactional contract, but in the case of relational contract, intensive reward, job satisfaction, career growth, trust is there. Contract type, explicit, clearly defined terms. Implicit in the case of relational contract, unwritten terms. Emotional investment in the case of transactional contract, low emotion, personal connection. But in the case of relational contract, it is high emotional, relational investment. Duration, transactional contract is short term, relational contract is long term. Now see, students, one of the things you must be clear that every organization there is one good relationship exists which is called as the employment relationship. In presence of employment relationship, what is the need of psychological contract? These questions may be in your mind. Employment relationship is something like that. What kind of written, focused, some kind of contract, valid contract in between employer and employee. Whereas in the case of psychological contract, there is the mutual understanding. This is the difference between the employment relationship, psychological contract. Whereas both the terms are using basically for managing relationship in between employer and employee. Moving to the next slide, characteristics of psychological contract. Since you are studying the basics of organization behavior, of course I will see the application part of psychological contract. It is unwritten, implicit. That means that is understood. It is not legally documented. It is based on mutual beliefs, values and expectation. Subjective and perceptual. Different employees may interpret promise differently, leading to potential misunderstanding. Dynamic and evolving over time. Expectation may change over the period of time. Relationship may be changed. Relationship may be upgraded over the period of time. Mutual expectation, reciprocity is very important. If you pay something to the employees, employees has to return, and there is the mutual understanding. Like as employees expect fair pay, career development, job security, whereas employers expect loyalty, productivity, adaptability. And this is the common understanding. Now moving to the next slide, formation of psychological contract. When psychological contract form basically. And what is the essence of understanding this type of things in organizational behavior? This is very important part, students. Formation of psychological contract is very important to know when this thing form. Like as here we have mentioned the three different phases: pre-employment phase, early employment phase, ongoing work experience. And I think the moment one person appear in interview of particular organization, he has some kind of expectation, and it is implicitly developed. It's not necessary that some other people, some other forces will clarify what kind of expectation of individual. And that is pre-employment phase. That means if you apply for some companies to the particular post, then you will have some kind of expectation. And definitely, employer also recruiting some people under some expectation. Early employment phase, that is at the very beginning point of employment. It's very important to know what way psychological contract can be developed. At this phase, early employment phase evolve during the early stage of employment as employees interpret workplace behavior and organizational practice. That means this particular phase, employees has some kind of idea about the organization, what he will be getting from this particular organizations, and what way the employer supposed to solve the problem of employees, some kind of unwritten understanding. But ongoing work experience, different authors have suggested different way, and I have given some of citation also. You can check the citation. Conway and Brenner 2005 argue that psychological contracts continuously develop through employees' experience with their job roles, employer behavior and organizational practices. Is very important part. And the moment you are gaining some kind of experience and your psychological contract supposed to increase, supposed to strengthen, because he is understanding the different phase of organization, understanding the culture of particular organization. Now see different other things like as antecedents of psychological contract. That means what are the things which motivate the people to develop psychological contract. There are 4 different things are there basically. That is individual factor, organizational factor, individual factors, organizational factors, and external factors, and socialization, workplace relationship. Now see, all the 4 factors collectively develop the psychological contract, that is so called mutual expectation. Starting from this point, individual factors like as personal values and work ethics, like as employees' core values, work ethic shape their approach to tasks, relationship and commitment to organizational goals. Personal values and work ethics. Now see, personal values is one of the intrinsic value of particular employees that defines what exactly you are expecting from somebody. Career goals and aspiration is very important. Employees' ambition for growth, advancement, leadership roles influence their level of engagement, satisfaction with their job. Career goals and aspiration is one of the important components of individual factors. So what exactly career goals and aspiration? Now see, Say for example, one particular person, he has been appointed as particular post in certain company as management cadre. Now see, this particular person is interested to pursue the future further study, higher studies. That is his expectation. It is the individual aspiration. Now see, thing is that employer can understand this thing or not. Employer can permit this particular person or not. I think it's a very critical things to address, because career is the central point of every individual. Understanding this kind of thing is very important things. Like as in banking job, graduation, PG is enough. But some people, they are interested for higher studies. But some of banks says no, what is the need of higher studies? That means there is a breach of psychological contract. Keep in mind, career is the central point of every individual. Nobody can sacrifice their career. Now, previous work experience is very important things. First work experience shape employees' expectation, adaptability to new work environment and organizational culture. Previous work environment experience is very important things, because that shape his aspiration. Because one person move from one organization to another organizations with some expectation. Demographics and personality is very important things. Gender, age, education, personality traits affect how employees interact with their work environment and manage workplace dynamics. These are individual factors. Now, organizational factors are there. Organizational culture and values. Now, that is also very important things. How an organization operates affects employees' expectation and perception. Organizational culture and values, the shared values and culture of an organization shape employees' expectation about behavior, work ethics and the role within the company. That means your culture and values must be like that, so that employees' expectation can be resolved, employees' aspiration can be achieved. Leadership and management style, that is from the part of the organizations, your leadership must be such that, so that mutual understanding, mutual cooperation is possible. HR policies practice is very important things. What HR policies practice of certain organization, because if your HR practice is not enough, that may adversely affect on organizational behavior. What practice you are following in the case of hiring, in the case of developing the people, in the case of maintaining the human resource, in the case of what I said, that the controlling the human resources. So these all shape the psychological contract. Job design, role clarity is very important things. What way you just design your job is very important part. What's your techniques or mechanism you adopt basically for defining your job? What level of what can I say, that particular term, job description and job specification, whether it is designed scientifically or not. I think this is the key point of any organizations which leads the better psychological contract. Now, more in socialization and workplace relationship is very important. Interaction with managers, colleagues, mentors refine psychological contract. Interaction with managers, colleagues, mentors, they are the three different group of people which can refine psychological contracts. Manager-employee relationship is very important. Leader-member relationship, LMX is much important. If you have the strong leader-member exchange, interaction, then definitely there will be the good psychological contract. Colleague and fair influence is very important part. One more important organizational factors basically, colleague and peer relationship. Peer role, organizational communication, that what level of communication you have. Do you have the proper mechanism of communication, exchanging information between the people, among the people and in between the groups, that defines the, what I said, that particular term, psychological contract. External environment factors is one of the important things: economic conditions, industry trends, competition, legal, labor, regulations. Economic conditions means economic stability, downturn, influence, employees' expectation regarding job security, salaries, career growth, opportunities. Then what is the role of employer, that particular cases, in the case of economic downturn? And that define the psychological contract. Industry trends and competition, market trends, competitive pressure, shape organizational strategies affecting employees' roles, job stability, career progression. Legal, labor regulations, employment laws, labor policies, establish standards for workplace rights, benefits, employer obligations, and that is so-called shaping employees' expectation of fairness and treatment. Legal and labor regulation is also one of the main part. What way you are applying the particular law, amended law in your organizations? What is the governance of particular things? That is so-called practicing law in organizations. That defines the psychological contract. Now see, impact of psychological contract, that is so-called consequences of psychological contract. If you have the good psychological contract, if you are understanding mutual expectation, job satisfaction, there will be the chances of job satisfaction. That students, you have seen the antecedents, now you are seeing the consequences. Job satisfaction, Rousseau 1995 said it has the positive impact on job satisfaction. Once people are satisfied, definitely people will be committed and organizations will have the proper job outcome. Then trust and psychological safety is very important part. Organizational citizenship behavior is very important context of as far as impact of psychological contract is concerned. Then if people are having good organizations is having good psychological contract, definitely employees not only ready to perform their task performance, of course they will be very free to do extra role performance. That means both the things are possible, extra role performance and the in-role performance. That is the positive impact of psychological contract. Now see, more important, breach of psychological contracts. Some cases what happen, breach, there may be the situation whereas we just out of the track of psychological contract. In what situation? Employees may experience disappointment, resentment, disengagement leading to lower job satisfaction, potential turnover. This may be one of the causes, breach of psychological contract. Desired rewards stimulate workers to work harder, breaking the psychological contract reduce motivation, performance. It also leads to negative outcomes and such as decreased engagement, higher turnover rates, and overall is some bad aspect of psychological contracts. The breach of psychological contract can lead to workplace conflict, stress. That is the Lester et al. 2002 and Broom 1964. All they have said breach not from one particular party, maybe from both the party. That means understanding each other is very important part. Now see, managing psychological contract effectively is very important part. What way you can manage psychological contract effectively. Transparent communication, consistent performance reviews, fair HR policies, employee engagement programs. That is the strategy not only from employees also. In employee strategy, like as clarify expectation, adapt to change, provide feedback. So these are all the sum of things, basically some of well-defined suggestions from the part of the employee, from the part of the employer. What way you can maintain long-lasting psychological contract. Now, more important things, some of questions I have designed basically, when you go through the entire slides, you will have some kind of queries. Now see, part 1, number 1 questions, how do transitional contracts differ from relational contract? One is short term, another is long term. Maybe more difference it will be clear once you see the entire slide very seriously. Number 2, what are the key characteristics of a psychological contract in the workplace? Some dimensions you can write here. What are the impacts of psychological contract in your organizations? The positive impact, negative impact also you can see breach of psychological contract you can see. Illustrate how to manage psychological contract in the workplace. Then some questions I have defined here. It is the questions already have defined the different slides. Some of books I am suggesting for ready reckoners. You can see that all of books, Rusho 1995 psychological contracts, Rusho DM, Parks 1993, some of good books, Robinson 1996, Broom 1964, you can see that particular books also. Very open books are there basically, maybe available different sources. Thank you very much.